future. I don't know if we're going to continue after. Is it good to be selfish in yeshiva with regards to learning? This is a very general question, but in order to answer the question, we have to ask the question we asked again. What is the purpose in being in yeshiva? So I assume the Bachar is asking, should he learn with other Bachrim that are not on his level, or should he learn himself the entire time? So why are we in yeshiva? If you always remember, the reason why we're in yeshiva is to bring Mashiach. That's the way we came down to this world, to make a dira b'tachtonim. And in order to make a dira b'tachtonim, in order to bring Mashiach, there's many ways of doing it. In general, they're divided into two ways of Yisachar and Zvulun, people that their main thing is to sit on the Torah, and people that their main thing is to do mitzvahs and help with others. At the same time, it's always explained that the Yid always has to have a combination of both Kavim and Avedas Hashem. A person can lock himself up and just do one Kav. A person can't just do Mitzvahim the whole day and never learn Torah. A person can't just learn Torah the whole day and never do mitzvahs. Everyone has to do both things. The question is, what's the Iker? So as a Bachar in Yeshiva, the way you bring Mashiach, the way you bring godliness into this world is by sitting and learning Torah the most time you can. So b'derech klal, in yeshiva, b'derech klal, the understanding is you come to yeshiva for yourself. You're there to learn Torah as much as you can, nigla and chassidus, and grow in your learning in Torah v'aveda. At the same time, there has to be an element of mitzvahs, of helping out others. So when it comes to helping out others, there's different levels. There's helping out others by doing mitzvahim on Friday, whenever it's applicable. Then there's ways of helping out others by learning with other bachrim. So when it comes to learning with other Bachrim, so there are some times where certain unique situations where Anhala will ask a Bachar to spend a lot of his day learning with other Bachrim, even though that might slow down the Bachar that's capable of learning more. But usually the regular answer is that a Bachar most of the day is meant to be learning himself, but a part of the day, whether it's a half hour or an hour, he's meant to be helping others. When it comes to learning with others, so here itself, there's different ways where the person that you're learning with can be on a lower level. Sometimes it can be a Bachar that's just slower than you. He doesn't have the skills to learn inside. He doesn't have the skills to understand what you're teaching him. And in that case, you have to do whatever you can, because you're basically going slower to learn with him. In some cases, the Bachar that you're learning with, the reason why he's slower is because he's not interested in learning. In that case, it's your job to go and get him and to sit down with him and to make him interested. So if it's a Bachar that's just slowing you down because he's lesser skills than you, he has a harder time reading inside, a harder time understanding, that's for sure not a question that you have to give him time, whether, like I said, a half hour, hour a day, something like that to help out. If it's a Bachar that's not interested, and in that time that you're running after him and to look for him, and then you end up just wasting a half an hour every day just finding him until you sit down with him, he talks and whatever, in that case, it's a lot more questionable. It makes more sense that eventually, after a little bit, you realize that you're just wasting time, so you should find someone else that you can help. So that's in general. So I want to share a story that I heard from Pinya Korfal of Hashalom. And Lubavitch, there was a Bachar, his name was Zalman David Hamliner. Not so famous amongst the regular stories of Chassidim, but there are many stories about him too. And in Lubavitch also, there were Bachrim that weren't really interested. In those times, the Yitzhar of the time was communism or Zionism. And there was a Bachar in Temchat Mim that also was involved in negative things, whatever the negative of those times were. And Zalman David spent a lot of time talking to him and fabringing with him, and he is trying to be a part of him, trying to get him more involved, but it wasn't accomplishing. So from what I understood from the Pinya Korf, this began the beginning of the year after Tishrei, and it went on till Purim. Till Purim, he was constantly, whenever he had a chance, he didn't tell me, he didn't say times, but it seems like he spent a lot of time with Zalman David with this Bachar. Eventually, when it came to Purim, so Zalman David sat down with him and he said, "We'll say l'chaim together, I'm saying goodbye." So what's pshat? Zalman David said, "I'm wasting too much time. We're speaking to you, I'm learning with you, trying to convince you, and therefore I came to Yeshiva here to learn for myself. I can't just spend so much time with you. So I was going to say l'chaim now, we'll bring today Purim, and from now on, I want you to get back involved, but I really can't continue wasting so much time. So this is like my goodbye party." And the poil, that Fabrengen was poil on that Bachar that he ended up getting involved again. So that's a story about showing that even in the Babish, there were Bachar that they spent time with others. And also I want to share that I was one time speaking to an older chassid, me and a few other people together were speaking to him, and we spoke about the concept of having the Siddhas Nefesh and people giving up on themselves to help out others. So there's a story that the Rebbe once complained to the Frierdiker Rebbe about a certain chassid. They say his name, if I can say his name, he passed away, Rabbi Yitzchak David Groner. That's what they say. Yitzchak David Groner was a shliach in Australia, and before that, when he was in America still, he was sent to do many different shlichusim. Yitzchak David Groner was a very big Talmud Chacham. And even later on in his life, he was also a big Talmud Chacham. He learned a lot, and he used to see Sfarim of other Rosh Yeshiva, and he would sometimes make a comment like, if I would have time, I could do the same thing. So in the earlier years, when the Frierdiker Rebbe would send him out on shlichus to these places, so the Rebbe complained once, and he told the Frierdiker Rebbe, like, you have a guy with such a good head, why are you wasting him on just teaching Aleph Beis to his little kids? He should be a Rosh Yeshiva. And the Frierdiker Rebbe responded, now as the fire is burning, you have no time to sort of see who shaykh to what. Everyone has to be used to help out put out the fire. So I was speaking to an older chassid once about the story, and he said he's familiar with that story, and seemingly the message of the Frierdiker Rebbe was that no matter how smart and how brilliant you are, you have to give up your time for others. However, this older chassid told me, in his experience of observing the Rebbe, and the Rebbe sending out shluchim on shlichus, he never saw the Rebbe take somebody with a brilliant head that's capable of being a Rosh Yeshiva to send him to be a shliach to teach Aleph Beis. So I started asking this older chassid about certain people that I know that, as far as I understand, these people are shaykh to be Rosh Yeshiva, and the Rebbe sent him to be shluchim. So this older chassid looked at me and he smiled. He said, I know who you're talking about. We spoke about that person. He said he's a very chassidish yid. He could learn nicely also, but he's not Rosh Yeshiva caliber. And again, this chassid is older than me. He said that he never saw the Rebbe take someone with Rosh Yeshiva caliber and make him into a teacher for Aleph Beis. So in yeshiva as well, if I'm not mistaken, there were certain chassidim, certain bachrim that were very brilliant, that they got special adracha to sit and learn non-stop. But that's like a very unique case for people that their thing is just to sit and learn and not help others. Even them, obviously they helped others, but not in such a way. But the vast majority of bachrim, 99.9% of bachrim, is my understanding, should spend about a half hour to an hour a day learning with a bachar that's on a lower level than them. Again, lower level in the sense that he is lower skills. So I want to add an important prat. The Bachar is saying that is it selfish or not? So another thing to point out, that this is all based on the understanding that when you're learning with him and you're getting slowed down, you're not gaining anything from it. So to point out, besides the fact that you're gaining the main reason why you came down to this world, which is bringing Mashiach, which is by hafatzas hayados and helping other people. In addition to that, even in learning skills, when you teach somebody else, everybody knows that when you teach somebody, you end up learning better. So it's in a sense, you can even be selfish by trying to find a bacher that's on a lower level than you. But this way, you end up gaining from it because you have to explain things better to him. As everybody, there's the famous Maimer Chazal, "Talmida yoser mikulam," that I learned most from my talmidim. So one of the basic pirushim is that because I have talmidim and I have to teach them, because of that, I end up learning better. So just to point out, even if you look at it from a selfish perspective, there's also a gain for you, but that's not the main cheshvan that you should have. The main cheshvan is to help out other people. Carlebach is better than non-Jewish music, right? So you're asking my opinion. I understand. So I agree that if a person is listening to non-Jewish music and to Carlebach, and I can only get him to stop one of them, I would try to get him to stop the non-Jewish music first, and only afterwards Carlebach. However, if there's someone that would say different, I would understand them. I want to share my understanding. The understanding is that. Imagine you're walking down the street and a goy drives down and throws something at you. So anti-Semite, you'll get very upset and whatever, but very possible after a little bit you'll get over it. But imagine you're in your room and you walk into your room and your roommate's talking negative about you, saying bad things about you. I don't think you'll be able to get over it so quickly. I think it'll take you a longer time. This is a yid, he's your roommate. How come when the goy, you got over it, big deal, whatever, anti-Semite, and you go weiter? But it comes to because it's a roommate, someone that's close to you, it hurts a lot more. So when it comes to goyim are obviously treif and klippa, and obviously it's a bad thing. But Carlebach was a person that grew up in Lubavitch. He had a very strong kesher in Lubavitch in the beginning, and he went and he didn't follow the Rebbe's instructions. He went and he did things that caused the Rebbe tremendous agmas nefesh, and therefore there's a svara to say that he is, as a Lubavitcher, he can be more painful to us, more hurtful to us for someone to connect to him. Again, I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't tell someone that better to listen to non-Jewish music than Carlebach. But if someone would say so, I would understand where he's coming from. I would disagree. But I would understand that there's a certain negativity in Carlebach, even worse so than in non-Jewish music. A certain small prat. Not Maisa, but I understand the concept. Why do we say Nivgam, Nishmose begins in Meroimim and the Frierdiker Rebbe and Tzaddikim in general, if the Rebbe told us he is here with us, even if it only means Beruchnius? So the question is not on us, the question is on the Rebbe. The Rebbe himself spoke about the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he said the Frierdiker Rebbe is in Olam Hazeh, Mazari B'chaim, Afu B'chaim, and he's alive and well. And at the same time, the Rebbe wrote about him, Nishmase begins in Meroimim, Schuse Yogan Aleinu, all the terms that are written on the tzaddik that passed away. And one time someone by Fabrengen said the Rebbe Nishmase Yedin, and the Rebbe was all upset. Why are you sending the Frierdiker Rebbe to Gan Eden? He's here with us. So the answer l'chayra is that there's two levels. There's a level that's just like in learning. You learn levels when you learn the Gemara. So everybody knows you don't pass an halacha from Gemara. The Gemara has such interesting explanations and biyurim. Yeah, but it's on the Gemara level. It's Torah and it's important to learn. But when it comes to halacha l'maisa, there's ways how to pass. So there's many things that have different places. When a person's learning the shita of Beis Shammai, the Gemara tells us Beis Shammai b'mokim b'silal ein Mishnah. Beis Shammai's opinion is bechlal not considered a Mishnah. Yet if somebody learns a Mishnah of halacha Beis Shammai, does he have to say Birchas HaTorah? Of course, this is Torah. This is the Eibish's Torah. If it's the Eibish's Torah, then how come it's not Halagya L'maisa? Because in the Torah of Hashem, there's different levels. There's levels of the Torah of Hashem, which is on a level of learning. There's Pshat, Remes, Drush, and Soid, and there's Shishim, Ribi, Perushim, and more, and so on. And then there's halacha L'maisa, how to behave. So just because something is real on one level, it doesn't mean that's the way you're supposed to act that way. The Peil Mamish the same thing. So I heard there was, I think, Chaim Shol Baruch, I'm not sure, it was a different Lubavitch Erov. That one time they asked him a shayla how to paskin halacha. And he paskin like the Chaya Odom. The Chaya Odom was a Rav that wrote a big sefer in halacha many years ago. And the Chassidim didn't like a sefer because they felt that the Chaya Odom, the reason why he wrote a sefer was in order for people not to learn the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, the Chaya Odom was always considered like the heavy mistake. It's before Mishnah Berurah times. Today people like talking about the Mishnah Berurah, so then they spoke about the Chaya Odom. So I think it was a Chaim Sholbrook that one time someone asked him, he passed him like the Chaya Odom. So they asked him, you yourself, by the Fabrengen, this Kislev, you're cursing out the Chaya Odom. Now you're passing him like him. So he said, if we're going to Fabrengen now, we'll continue cursing him out. By a Fabrengen is one thing. By a Fabrengen we talk mitzvah darkei achsidus, mitzvah a certain level. When it comes to halacha l'maisa, as if we have behavior. And that's my understanding of how the Rebbe applied it to the Frierdiker Rebbe also. On many levels, we don't say Nishmas begins in Meroimim. On many levels, we say that Frierdiker Rebbe is alive and with us, like all the tzaddikim. And it comes to a level of halacha l'maisa, there's halachas of how to talk about someone that passed away. And therefore, right after the Yud Tavshin Yud, the Rebbe right away changed the blanks where it said the Shlit on the Frierdiker Rebbe, one of the first things, but it was right away that he did it, that he made sure that now in halachic, when it's coming to writing, it should be written in such a way of someone that passed away. What was the best year of you teaching Shir Aleph? Now that I have Yoni, nothing tops that. That was the best ever. What is a half-day fast worth, and does it get you atonement? So in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe talks about fasting. So first of all, before we talk about it, just to clarify again and again that the Rebbe says that it's not our derech to fast. People should not be fasting today, even though it's known again and again, even though fasting helps, but the Rebbe tells us often today is not our derech. Many letters in Igros where the Rebbe is telling people that I heard that you're fasting, and the Rebbe is very upset about it. So in Perek Beis of Yigeres HaTshuvah, the Alter Rebbe talks bechlal about fasting, and he explains the point of a fasting, like he brings from the Gemara, she'miyut chelbi v'domi shenismayit kili krafti lefanecha. By being memayit, by having less fats and less blood, meaning less eating, so this way, as if I'm giving up for myself to the Eibishter. And that's a general point of a fast, and therefore, if it's a half a day, the Pashas is the same idea. But later on in Perek Gimel, the Alter Rebbe talks about that even though he himself, already the Alter Rebbe says that people shouldn't fast as many fasts as it says in Tikunei Arizal, Kisvei Arizal, because it's too much. But then he says, Kol Bal Nefesh HaChafetz Kirvas Hashem, person that wants to get close to Hashem, so he should try to fast at least one time in his lifetime the amount of fast for every Aveda. So he gives one example. I have to fast 84 times, and he says you can fast them in the short days of the winter, and then he says you have to fast 3 times 84. So he says to be mashtim the other 252 yisana oy daled pa'amim pei daled ad achar chatzos hayom bilvad, till half a day. And he rings the mechsh of Gam Kintainis b'Yerushalmi. So in the Gemara Yerushalmi it says that fasting 2 half a days has the same level of atonement as a half a day, even though obviously you can between every meal you're fasting for an hour. So let's combine all our hours now. That's not counted. It has to be a din of tiny choice where a person accepts it upon himself and he fasts a half a day. This way, And 2.5 days after. But again, the Rebbe tells us not to do so. At the same time, I was told, I don't know if this is true, but in 770 every day there's a minyan for Mincha at the first possible Zman by Mincha G'dayla. In the back of 770, what they call the tunnel today. So over there there's a Mincha every day, and there's a number of older Siddim that are always there by that minyan, or very often they're there. And I was told by people, I never tested it, that's not my place to know, but I was told that a lot of these older Siddim are fasting half days, and therefore they want to have a Mincha the first thing. I don't know if it's true or not. If you want to follow these people throughout the day, you're welcome to. Why is there a wall around the Mordas HaMachpelah, and how did the cave change into a building? So the cave didn't change into a building. On top of the cave, they built a building. So the way the historians explain it is that the first day was Hurdus. Hurdus built a building over there. Hurdus was in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. And afterwards, years later, the Muslims came and they turned the building, they added onto the building and they made it into a mosque. And that's how it is today. That's what it is. Unfortunately, still the Arabs have more control than us over it. But that's whatever, if whoever went to Mordas HaMachpelah, you have to go up steps. You're really going on top. You're not going underneath on the bottom where the caves are. No, I don't know exactly. I don't think anybody has a clear picture of what goes on underneath. Just to point out, whoever went to Mordas HaMachpelah, so when people go there, they're all excited. They forget to realize an important thing, that there are 3 major sections over there. There's what's called the Ulam Avram and Ulam Yaakov, that where the Yidden are allowed always to go to Avram Avinu's cave and Yaakov Avinu's cave. And by Yitzchak Avinu's cave, you're only allowed to go 10 times a year. This is the Israeli government. This Shabbos, Chayei Sarah, usually it's a huge Shabbos. I imagine the Shabbos was also like that, where they're one of the only times in the year that they allow the Yidden to go into Ulam Yitzchak. So those are the 3 things, and people go and they talk about it all the time. But there's something missing. What's missing? Adam and Chava. People don't realize that there's no place for Adam and Chava. However, there is something else over there, what they call Kever Yosef. Now we know that Yosef HaTzadik was buried in Shechem. So there's a Kever for Shechem and Yosef HaTzadik, because there used to be a yeshiva there, Yosef Chai. But in Mordas HaMachpelah, there's officially another. It's not a whole big ulam. It's not a whole big room. It's just as you're walking in the lobby or the hallway over there. There's like you pass by. Oh, this is supposed to be Kever Yosef. So I was told that might be Kever Adam V'Chava, but again, this is all on top what they have after many, many years. I don't know if anybody knows what's really going on underneath. Is the Rebbe alive? This question comes up all the time, so every time we say something else, the Rebbe will choose to share the following. I heard this from Rabbi Bucket from California. So he said a story from his father, a verse from his father, Chaim Meir Bucket. He says in Parshas Vayigash, when Yosef HaTzadik revealed himself to his brothers after the whole story where he made as if he's not his brothers and so on. So after that, Yosef, when he finally revealed himself to his brothers, he told them, Ani Yosef, ha'oid avi chai. I am Yosef, is my father still alive? So all the Mefarshim ask, okay, what's the question, is my father still alive? The whole joke, the whole trick was all about, Yaakov didn't want to send Binyamin because he's his youngest son and he has such a kesher with him. Like the whole thing back and forth was all about Yudah saying, I can't go back without Binyamin, my father's going to die. What kind of question is, ha'oid avi chai? Obviously his father's alive. That's the whole discussion. In addition to that, they didn't answer the question, but that's like another what the Mefarshim talk about that. So the Mefarshim have many different answers. So the book had a Geshmak Avert, and he told them like this. He told them, Ani Yosef, I'm Yosef. And you guys remember me. I used to learn with my father all the time, right? I was the Ben Skunim. He don't tell with me all the time. I want to know, look at me now. When you look at me, do you see in me that my father is still alive? The question was that since I'm 22 years away from my father, I haven't seen my father in 22 years. So till now, you guys were looking at me as the Mishnah Lamelech. You weren't thinking about me as Yosef. You just thought I'm a random person. Now that I'm telling you that I'm Yosef, do you see in me that my father's alive? That was his question. This was before the Gimel Tammuz of Yaakov Avinu. This was Yaakov Avinu's Kipshuta alive without any arguments. And his question was still, I don't take questions on the spot. You only do them, have to prepare for these things. And Bechlal, questions about myself, I don't choose to answer always. So the question, Ha'id Avichai, means that when you're discussing if a tzaddik is alive or not, the question is really about you. A lot of times these arguments are really, really stupid. You have two bachrim that both of them don't go to the mikveh, and both don't orchitas, and they're arguing, is the Rebbe alive or not? Like, both of you guys are not, why are you wasting your time on such kind of arguments? Is the Rebbe alive? The question is, if I look at you, do I see that the Rebbe is alive? That's the real question the Rebbe is supposed to be asking. If you look at me, do you see the Rebbe is alive? We know that all tzaddikim are alive. There's no question about that. To what level, to how much, how do you measure it? It's the whole nafkamina is what to say. Should I say ziyah or shlita? That's what you have to care about the whole time. That's the fine. Now, so ziyah, so shlita. Now what? Why is that a nafkamina? The real question is, if you look at me, do you see the Rebbe alive in me? Why should you invest so much time to figure out if to say ziyah or shlita, or to convince the other person to say ziyah or shlita? Why are you investing your energy on that? Do you really think that the Rebbe wants you to invest in that? Isn't that more? Isn't chitas and Rambam and shmiras haloshin, shmiras hayinayim, shmiras hasdorim, Torah mitzvahs bechlal? Isn't that more important? The kuli alma. No one argues that's more important. So all the time that's invested usually comes from a place that it's not in such a way that you can say ani Yosef Ha'id Avichai. Ha'id Avichai is the bacher that sits and learns the whole day and he comes to Seder and does his mitzvahim. That's where Ha'id Avichai. That's the Pashat Pshat is Mazari B'chaim Mafu B'chaim. So that's the message. And if someone asks you the question, what do you think? So I think that this is a good word to share with them. What's the difference between seichel and machshava? I don't know if this is making a joke or not, but I said this in shir all the time, so I'll say it again now. That I was speaking to Rabbi Tzvi Freeman. Rabbi Tzvi Freeman is a big writer for Chabad.org, the senior editor of Chabad.org. So I was talking to him once, and he was saying that he was once teaching Chassidus to older Bachrim, 21-year-olds, and they didn't know the difference between Seichel and Machshava. So he was telling me, I teach in Yeshiva, so how is it possible that Bachrim go through the system of 8 years, 7 years learning Chassidus, and they still don't know what's the difference between Seichel and Machshava? So I told him, you're making a mistake. You're assuming that it was not taught. It was taught. We teach about what the things all the time. The problem is that Bachrim don't pay attention, or they don't show up to shir, or they fall asleep, and that's why they don't know. And I did an experiment in my class, and I do it every year since I had this conversation with him a few years ago. The beginning of the year, I say in shir, say the whole story, and I tell them in advance. I'm going to explain to you what Seichel and Machshava is now, and a few months down the line, I'm going to ask you again what Seichel and Machshava. And I have yet to be proven wrong. Even though I explained it, 3-4 months later, I asked the Bachim around, and nobody remembered. Yeah, you spoke about it, and I started saying, yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, right. So after I do it 3 or 4 times, then they start remembering. So it's not a matter of not teaching it, it's a matter of Bachim not paying attention, not understanding. So we'll try again, one last time. Maybe some people still remember, they heard it so many times, they can still remember it. But in short, Seichel means what you understand, and Machshava means what you're thinking about. Machshava means when you're actively thinking about something. Actively thinking about something doesn't mean you understand it. A simple example, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Everybody understands that 2 plus 2 equals 4. However, you don't think about that all the time. When you're making calculations, you have to think about mathematical things, so you might think about that. But even though you're not thinking about it, you understand it. Understanding means it makes sense to you. What does machshava mean? What you're actively thinking about. You can think that 2 plus 2 is 5. Just like you can say the words 2 plus 2 is 5, you can think those words as well. Just because you're thinking them in your mind doesn't mean it makes sense to you. And so to everything else that you learn and you read. You can read Gemara and think words of Gemara. Sometimes you understand what you're reading. Sometimes you don't understand it. Sometimes you understand what you're thinking. Sometimes you don't understand. A machshava is a lavush. It's only what you're actively thinking about. And what you actually understand is your seichel, what actually makes sense to you. So usually, most of us, we think about things that we understand, or things that we're trying to understand. We're thinking about them till they make sense to us. But there's a seichel, the machshava. The seichel is what actually makes sense to you, and the machshava is what you're actively thinking about. Ad kan, a good avach.